They told her she'd walk again the way people say things they don't believe, carefully, with their eyes on the floor. 6 months after the accident, Catherine Wren arrived at Millhaven Rehabilitation Center in a wheelchair she gripped like a steering wheel, her jaw set, her reputation preceding her by a full week. I know this because I was the one who set up the East Therapy Bay that morning, stacking foam wedges, checking the parallel bars, turning on the track lighting the way I did every day before anyone else arrived. I was the aide. That's what my lanyard said. That's what most people saw. My name is Elliot. I've been at Millhaven 3 years. Before that I was somewhere else entirely, but I don't lead with that, and no one here has ever asked. I push the therapy cart. I set up equipment. I know where every resistance band, every balance board, every wedge cushion lives in this building, and I keep them in order because order is what I have to offer now, and I give it completely. She came in at 9:15, 15 minutes late, in a way that said she was never late, she simply arrived when she chose to arrive. Her assistant held the door. A formal physical therapist named Renner introduced himself and extended his hand. She shook it without looking at him. She looked at me. Not because she recognized me. Because I was the only person in the room not performing. "You," she said. "What's your name?" "Elliot," I said. She looked at my cart, at the folded towels and the resistance bands arranged by tension. "You're organized," she said, and it didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like a note she was filing. I nodded and went back to setting up the parallel bars. That was how it started. The first 2 weeks were not easy to watch. She had been told, correctly, by good people, that her spinal contusion had damaged the communication between her lower lumbar and her left leg in ways that might never fully resolve. She had processed that information the way powerful people often do, by deciding it was wrong, and by working toward proving it wrong with a ferocity that was going to injure her further if no one was careful. Renner was careful. He was also, in the quiet language of the therapy gym, not reading her correctly. I didn't say that. It wasn't my place to say it. But I watched. She compensated on the right side. Every session, every step between the parallel bars, she loaded her right hip and let the left trail, and the formal assessment had missed it because they were measuring her range and her pain response, not the way she breathed when she thought no one was counting. She held her breath on the 4th step. Every time. Which meant she was bracing something that should have been releasing. On the 3rd week, I handed her a towel after a session and said, quietly, "You hold your breath on step 4. She looked at me. "I do not." "You do," I said. "Try counting out loud on the way back." Renner started to say something. She held up one hand at him without breaking eye contact with me. "Fine," she said. "I'll count." She counted. She exhaled on 4. And for the first time in 3 weeks, her left foot cleared the floor by a clean half-inch. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me with the expression of someone recalculating. After that, she started asking me things. Small things, at first, whether I thought the aquatic therapy was worth the schedule disruption, whether the parallel bars were better at a half degree of tilt. I answered her directly, without hedging, the way I answer questions I know the answers to. She noticed that too. I could tell she was building a picture of me she couldn't quite finish, and I didn't help her complete it. That wasn't deception. It was simply that the past wasn't relevant to what she needed right now, and what she needed right now was someone to pay attention to what her body was actually doing. We talked about other things too. She told me, once, that she'd missed her company's 4th quarter board presentation for the first time in 11 years. She said it the way you say something when you want someone to tell you it doesn't matter. I didn't tell her that. I said, "What were you going to present?" She looked startled. Then she told me about a logistics restructuring she'd been building for 18 months, and as she talked, she stood straighter, and her left hip opened up 3 degrees. I told her about Maya that same week. I don't usually talk about my daughter at work, but we'd been in a long stretch of parallel bars repetitions and the silence had gone comfortable, and I mentioned that Maya was in the school science fair and had built a model of the Achilles tendon out of binder twine and wooden dowels. Catherine laughed, a real laugh, short and surprised, the first one I'd heard from her. She said, "Did she win?" "Honorable mention," I said. The judges didn't appreciate the realism of the fraying. She smiled at the floor and took another step. By the 5th week, the formal therapists had begun to notice something shifting. Renner pulled me aside after a Tuesday session and asked what I'd been doing with the breathing cues. I told him. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You have some background." "A little," I said. He didn't push. People at Millhaven don't push. It's one of the reasons I chose this place. Catherine made progress. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind, the real kind, which is quiet and incremental and sometimes looks, from the outside, like nothing much. But I could see it in the way she moved through the gym without bracing, in the way she stopped loading her right side quite so hard, in the way she began to trust her left leg to hold her for one full step before she checked on it. These things matter. They add up. On a Thursday morning in the 7th week, she arrived before me. She was already in the therapy gym, standing at the parallel bars alone, just standing, not holding on. I stopped in the doorway. She heard me and said, without turning, "I wasn't sure I could do this." "Stand," I said. "Trust something that can't be measured," she said. I set down my cart and came to stand beside her. We stood there for a moment in the early morning quiet, both of us looking at the bars she wasn't holding, and I thought about what it costs a person like her to let go of something she can grip. "The measurement comes later," I said. "The decision comes first." She nodded, slowly. "Your daughter," she said. "She's the reason you're here, isn't she? Not here at the clinic. Here instead of somewhere else." I looked at her. "I've been watching you too," she said quietly. "You know things. The way you know things, it's not from a certification course." I didn't answer right away. That was its own kind of answer, and we both knew it. "Wherever you were before," she said, "I think it cost you something to leave." "It gave me something more," I said. "That's not the same as a cost." She looked at the bars. She lifted her hands off them. She held that for 10 seconds. Then the door from the aquatic wing opened and a patient named Gerald, 71, 3 weeks post-hip replacement, the kind of man who pushed harder than he should, came through the door, took 2 steps, and went down. I was across the gym before I knew I'd moved. I caught Gerald's shoulder, took his weight, brought him down controlled rather than let him crash, and in the same motion I had 2 fingers on his neck and my eyes on his collar and I was listening to his breathing, short and wet on the left side, which meant one thing, and I heard myself giving instructions in a voice I hadn't used in years, a voice that did not ask, a voice that expected to be obeyed. "Get the crash cart. Tell them suspected left-sided pneumothorax, not cardiac, tell them that exactly. Don't let them start a cardiac protocol. Go." The aide at the door went. I kept my hand on Gerald's sternum, counting, keeping his airway clear, watching the rise and fall, and in 40 seconds Dr. Anita Soren from the medical floor came through the door at a run and stopped 3 feet from me. She looked at Gerald. She looked at my hands. She looked at my face. "Elliot," she said. Not a greeting. A recognition. "Left side," I said. "Breath sounds are diminished. He needs imaging before anyone touches his chest." "Yes," she said, and took over, and the room became the organized motion of people who knew what to do. I stepped back. I stepped back the way I always step back. Catherine was standing at the parallel bars. Not holding them. She had seen all of it. She had heard Anita say my name like that, the way people say a name when they are accounting for something they didn't expect to find. Gerald was stabilized and moved within minutes. The gym went quiet. Anita caught my eye on her way out and held it for 1 second, and in that second she asked a question I answered by looking at the floor. She nodded, barely, and left. I picked up my cart. I straightened the resistance bands. "Elliot," Catherine said. I didn't turn right away. "Elliot," she said again, and her voice was different, not demanding, not the voice she'd walked in with 8 weeks ago. "Who are you?" I turned around. She wasn't asking about my lanyard. She wasn't asking about my certification. She was asking the real question, the one that had been building since the first week, and she was asking it standing on her own 2 feet without holding anything. "I was a surgeon," I said. "Orthopedic trauma. 11 years. I was good at it." She waited. "My wife died when Maya was 3, I said. The work was, it was everything. The hours, the call schedule, the way it took up all the space. And after Sarah died, I looked at Maya and I understood that I had two choices. I could keep being the surgeon, and give Maya a father who was mostly absent, or I could be her father, and give the surgery to someone younger who hadn't made the calculation yet. The gym was very quiet. You gave it up, Catherine said. I set it down, I said. There's a difference. She looked at me for a long moment. Outside the east windows, October light was moving across the parking lot, slow and gold. I have a meeting with Renner this afternoon, she said. He's going to tell me I've plateaued. I know, I said. You haven't. She looked at the windows. She looked at the door to the parking lot. Will you walk with me, she said. Outside. I got her cane from the cart. She took it. We went out through the east door into the October morning, and she walked, slowly, with the cane, her left foot clearing the ground clean and sure, across the parking lot to where a line of maples had dropped their leaves in a wide copper ring on the pavement. She stopped there. She was breathing evenly. The day I had the accident, she said, I was on the phone. I was always on the phone. She looked at the leaves. I've been thinking about that for 6 months. I didn't say anything. You set down 11 years, she said. For a little girl and a science fair project about tendons. She almost smiled. I've been calling that a sacrifice in my head. But you don't call it that. No, I said. What do you call it? I thought about Maya at the kitchen table, the binder twine and the dowels, the serious way she explained to me that the judges simply hadn't understood the biomechanics. I thought about Saturday mornings and the way she still fit under my arm when we read. The right thing, I said. I call it the right thing. Catherine Wren stood in the October light in a parking lot in Mill Haven, holding a cane she was barely using, and she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I think I'm going to call my board. Tell them I'll present in January. That sounds right, I said. She looked at me sideways, and there was something in her face I hadn't seen before, not gratitude exactly, but the particular expression of someone who has recalculated and arrived at a number that surprises them. We walked back inside. She didn't let go of the cane. But she wasn't leaning on it either. That afternoon, Renner told her she'd plateaued. She listened politely, thanked him for his assessment, and asked if they could schedule an additional morning session with the aide. He said he'd arrange it. Maya asked me that evening how the CEO lady was doing. I told her she'd walked across the parking lot today on her own. Maya thought about that for a moment, the way she thinks about things that matter. She's going to be okay, she said. Not a question. Yeah, I said. I think she is. Maya went back to her homework. I stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the maples through the window, still holding a few last leaves, and I thought about what it means to set something down carefully, a career, a grief, a phone call, and how sometimes the thing you set down is exactly what someone else needed to pick up. I didn't save Catherine Wren. She did the work. Every step, every exhale, every morning she chose to come back, that was her. I just paid attention. That's what I have to give. That's what I give completely.